friend Trout Hunter here down at beautiful 11 Mile Canyon again. We're chewing some sunflower seeds, we're doing some fishing. This is what I like to call Rainbow's Alley. Lots of rainbows live up and down this stretch. You can catch them in the shallows and in the riffles, or the shallow riffles, I guess I should say. Right now today, I'm using a crane fly. They bumped the flows recently, so a lot of that stuff's gotten kicked up, and the trout are definitely not shy about taking one of these bad boys. It's an ugly fly, super simple to tie. I've already nailed about 4 of them today, just in the past hour on this fly, and then we're followed by a little caddis. You can see that this thing kind of resembles a caddis case, so a little maybe pre-pupa or pupating caddis right there. Anyhow, we're going to throw it in and see if we can pull some fish. Came off, but at least you know what you have on is working. Now let's talk technique. Now this particular stretch of water is going to be a very shallow, ruffly water in Rainbow's Alley. That's where a lot of rainbows like to hold and feed, is in the ruffles. Now the ruffles create a environment where food is being kicked up, bugs and whatnot, underneath the rocks, and the fish like to eat that. It's easy eating, easy feeding, as one might say. Now, of course, when we're casting, I'm casting upstream, always. Rarely do I make a downstream cast. The only instance that I do that is if we're in an eddy where the water is rotating back towards us as it's flowing downstream. Now, there are other fishermen that do like that technique. If I'm dry fly fishing, I'll make an exception. I will fish downstream occasionally, but the reason why I like to fish upstream is because as the hook is drifting, and the fish are facing the way that the water is flowing, when they take the fly, the hook hooks into the side of their mouth. That's the best place to hook a fish. That's where you're not going to lose the fish. They're not going to come unbuttoned most of the time. Now, if you're fishing downstream, usually the fish are going to get hooked right here in their upper lip. And that I do find to be a bit more challenging to keep the hook, especially for fishing, you know, size 20s, 22s, what we typically fish on the South Platte. So I tend to like to make an upstream cast. Now, of course, if I'm casting across the stream, I make a long cast, and then I put in what is called a mend. And basically what a mend does is it takes the slack out of the water, creating a natural drift so that the fly can drift through the water naturally, where the fish is going to see it and say, hey, that's food. And essentially that's what we're doing out here. Most fly anglers will put way too much pressure and way too much thought on what type of fly they're using. Now, of course, that does have some importance. But for today, for instance, I'm fishing one of the most disgustingly tied, ugly crane flies that I've ever tied up in my life, and the fish are just going bonkers over it. So what's the real trick? The real trick is good drift and technique. And what do I mean by drift? Well, what are the fish looking for? What are they eating in the water? They're not looking for your fly, I can tell you that much. No, they're looking for naturally drifting flies. Drifting insects, aquatic insects that are bumping up against the rocks and flowing downstream, where the fish can easily catch them in their mouths. There's another aspect to fishing these waters. Now, I'm not doing any sight fishing right now. Now, I do like to sight fish, of course, especially if I'm hunting for big trout. Trout hunter. But, you know, when I'm out here in Rainbow's Alley at 11 Mile Canyon, I'm mostly blind fishing. And what I mean by that is I'm fishing for fish that I cannot see. Although, I do have an advantage in a technique, which is called reading the river. Reading the river basically means that you're looking at the river and you're fishing in the spots where the fish most likely are. And those spots are where there's a lot of food. If there's a lot of food there, there's going to be a lot of trout there. That's just plain and simple. So where is there a lot of food? Well, if you'll see behind me, we've got a nice turbulent riffle and a little bit of foam kicked up too. It kind of shows you where the water is splashing up against the rocks underneath and kicking up the food for the trout to eat. So we look for these areas where it can be a little bit more turbulent. And then we fish right behind them where the water evens out a little bit. That's where most of the trout like to feed. Another good place to throw your fly are behind structures. Boulders, rocks, even if you're on the Dream Stream, you can find some man-made structures that the trout like to feed behind. Anything where the water is disturbed. Now, of course, you can catch fish in just about any type of water. Still water, slow-moving water, deep runs. But where we're fishing right now, the technique that we're using, we are fishing where the water is churning up the trout's food.